On the morning of September 4, 1962, a forest ranger named Dale Pickett was hiking a survey route through the Salmon River Mountains of central Idaho, roughly 14 miles northeast of the town of Challis, when he came upon a section of trail that no longer looked the way it had in July. A limestone outcropping he had used as a landmark for 3 seasons was partially obscured by freshly turned earth. The soil had been disturbed across an area perhaps 40 feet wide. Drag marks in the loose gravel ran from a narrow opening in the rock face toward the tree line. And strung across the mouth of that opening, chest high, was a length of government-issue utility cable staked at both ends into the rock, with iron pins that had not rusted. Pickett noted the cable in his survey log. He noted the disturbed earth. He noted that the opening itself, a horizontal fissure in the limestone perhaps 4 feet tall and 6 feet wide, was dark enough that he could not see its depth from where he stood. He did not enter. His log entry for that day is brief and precise. Fissure at survey marker 11, Bora Creek drainage, north face. Access cable installed, origin unknown. Will report to district. He reported to district. His report was received. And that is the last entry in the Challis National Forest record that references the fissure at survey marker 11. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. What Pickett did not know when he wrote that log entry, and what would not become traceable until decades later through records requests and the patient accumulation of individual testimonies, was that the cable across that opening had been installed 3 weeks earlier by personnel from the Idaho Army National Guard's 116th Engineer Battalion, operating under orders that their own commanding officer could not produce documentation for, when asked 22 years after the fact, by a journalist named Howard Kenilworth writing for a small Boise publication called The Mountain Record. Kenilworth's 1984 interview with the retired battalion commander, a lieutenant colonel named Earl Stassen of Twin Falls, was published in the Mountain Record's October issue. Stassen told Kenilworth that in August 1962, his unit had received what he described as a lateral tasking, meaning an assignment that did not originate within the normal Guard command structure, but arrived through a channel he identified only as federal coordination. The unit was to travel to a site in the Salmon River Mountains, conduct an assessment of a subsurface feature, and secure the entrance pending further instruction. Stassen said 3 vehicles and 11 men made the trip. They were there for 4 days. He did not describe what they found inside. When Kenilworth pressed him on this, Stassen said, "I was told the assessment results went to someone above my pay grade. I never saw a written summary. I never asked for one." Then he added something that Kenilworth recorded verbatim in his notes, which survive in the Mountain Record archive. The men who went in came out different. Not badly, just quieter. The Salmon River Mountains sit at the center of one of the most geologically complex zones in the American West. The Idaho batholith, a mass of granite intruded into older rock roughly 100 million years ago, dominates the landscape. But the mountains northeast of Challis contain older material, Paleozoic limestone and dolomite, that predate the granite by 200 million years. This limestone is riddled with cave systems. The Bora Creek drainage alone has 14 documented cave entrances within a 6-mile radius. Most are small, tight, hydrologically active, the ordinary product of acidic water working through soluble rock over geological time. The fissure at survey marker 11 was not small. That much is clear from the accounts that accumulated over the years following Pickett's 1962 observation, accounts that came not from one source but from at least 4 separate individuals who either entered the site or were present when others did, in the period between 1959 and 1962, before the cable went up. The earliest account belongs to a geological survey technician named Roy Alderman, who worked for the United States Geological Survey out of the Boise field office from 1956 to 1964. Alderman is not a footnote. His name appears in the acknowledgements of 3 USG's publications from that period. He was a working professional with a documented career. In a recorded interview conducted in 1991 by an oral historian at Boise State University, part of a project on the history of federal land survey work in Idaho, Alderman described entering the fissure in August 1959 while conducting a karst assessment in the Bora Creek drainage. He said the entrance passage was tight for the first 20 or 30 feet, then opened into a space he described as a room. He used that word without qualification. He said the ceiling was high enough that he could not reach it with his arm extended, and the beam of his lamp did not clearly define its upper limit. The floor was level, covered in what he identified as calcium carbonate powder, fine and undisturbed. The walls, he said, were smooth in a way that bothered him. He had worked in dozens of Idaho caves. He knew what dissolution looked like, the scalloped undulating surface that moving water leaves in limestone. These walls did not look like that. They were flat. Not perfectly flat, but flat in the way a surface becomes flat when something works it repeatedly from the same direction. Alderman said he advanced into a second space, larger than the first, connected by a passage he had to turn sideways to enter. In that second space, on the floor along the western wall, he found objects he described as stone cylinders, roughly 18 inches long, uniform in diameter, arranged in a row with a consistency he called deliberate. He did not remove any of them. He photographed them with a 35mm camera. He returned to Boise and wrote a field note describing what he had found. He told the oral historian in 1991 that the field note was never entered into the official file. He said his supervisor at the time, a man he named as Harold Trask, told him the site was outside the scope of the karst assessment, and his observations should be kept informal. Alderman kept a personal copy of the field note. He said he still had it in 1991. He died in 1998. His personal papers have not been located. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Between Alderman's entry in 1959 and the Guard unit's arrival in August 1962, two other individuals documented entering the fissure. A rancher named Clyde Beaumont, whose family had worked land in the Bora Creek drainage since the 1920s, told his grandson in the late 1980s that he had entered the cave as a young man, sometime in the early 1950s, and had turned back after what he estimated was 200 feet because the passage descended sharply and he had no rope. He remembered the ceiling of the entrance chamber as being far above his head. He remembered the floor as clean, meaning free of the animal bones and organic debris that accumulate in natural cave systems frequented by wildlife. He said it smelled like stone and nothing else. The fourth account is the most specific and the most difficult to verify. A woman named Patricia Arlen, who gave a statement to Kenilworth during his 1984 investigation, said her late husband, a mining engineer named Gerald Arlen, had been brought to the site in the spring of 1962 by two men he described as government contractors. Gerald Arlen had extensive experience in hard rock mining across Nevada and Idaho. He had assessed dozens of underground workings. Patricia Arlen said her husband told her, on the evening he returned from that visit, that the chambers inside the hill were not a natural cave and were not a mine working. He used a word she remembered, precisely because she had to ask him what it meant. He called it a gallery, a long, horizontal space, worked smooth, with evidence of regular use over a very long period. He told her there were markings on the walls of the second chamber, not pictographs, not anything he recognized from his years of work in the region. Regular, incised lines arranged in patterns he described as architectural, meaning they seemed to denote measurement or structure rather than image or symbol. Gerald Arlen died in 1971. Patricia Arlen gave her statement to Kenilworth in person and signed it. Kenilworth published a summary in the Mountain Record. The full statement is in his notes, which were donated to the Idaho State Historical Society in 2003. The 116th Engineer Battalion returned from the Bora Creek site in September 1962. 11 men went in, 11 came out. No formal after-action report has been located through records requests to the Idaho Military Division, the Department of Defense, or the National Archives. A Freedom of Information request filed in 2007 by a researcher named Thomas Calloway produced a response from the National Archives stating that records for the relevant unit and time period were either not held or not identifiable from the information provided. This is a standard response. It is also, in the context of an 11-man, 4-day operation with vehicles and equipment in a national forest, a surprising one. Field units generate paperwork. They generate fuel logs, vehicle maintenance records, personnel accountability rosters. Those documents exist for virtually every Guard operation of that era. For the Bora Creek deployment, they have not surfaced. Stassen, the retired commander, told Kenilworth in 1984 that he assumed the records had been handled at the federal coordination level, meaning whatever agency had issued, the lateral tasking had taken custody of the documentation. He did not know which agency that was. He said the name of the contact he had dealt with was not given to him in writing. The cable across the entrance was still in place when Pickett saw it in September 1962. It was still in place when a hiker photographed the site in 1967. That photograph, a 35mm print, is held by the photographer's family in Salmon, Idaho. The cable is visible in the foreground. The fissure opening is visible behind it, dark, with the characteristic horizontal geometry that Alderman and Beaumont both described. By 1972, the cable was gone. Whether it was removed or deteriorated is not known. The opening remained accessible but unremarked upon in any official record. In 1989, the Forest Service conducted a standard cave inventory in the Bora Creek drainage as part of a broader cast assessment for the Challis National Forest. The inventory documented 14 cave entrances, the fissure at what had been Survey Marker 11, a marker that no longer appears on post-1965 maps of the area, is not among them. The grid coordinates that can be inferred from Pickett's 1962 survey log place the site within the inventory area. It was not recorded. This is not evidence of concealment by the Forest Service. Cave inventories depend on visible, accessible entrances. If the fissure had partially collapsed, or if the entrance had become obscured by vegetation or talus movement in the intervening decades, it would simply not have been found. The Salmon River Mountains are not a managed park with maintained trails. They are remote, difficult terrain where a fissure could become invisible from 10 feet away after a single hard winter. But Alderman described a passage that opened into chambers. Beaumont described descending passages. Gerald Arlen described a gallery. These are not descriptions of a shallow surface feature that a small rockfall could seal. They are descriptions of a system with depth and volume. Underground systems of that scale do not disappear. The rock above them does not redistribute itself. Whatever Alderman photographed in 1959, whatever Gerald Arlen called a gallery in 1962, is still there. The question of what it is has simply never been formally posed by anyone with the equipment and authority to answer it. The stone cylinders Alderman described are the detail that separates his account from a description of an unusual natural cave. Natural caves contain geological features. They contain stalactites, columns, speleothems of every variety. They do not contain rows of worked stone objects arranged with deliberate uniformity on a flat floor. Alderman was a USC's field technician. He had spent 3 years assessing karst systems across southern Idaho. He knew the difference between a geological formation and an object that had been shaped and placed. He used the word arranged. That is a precise word. It does not describe what water and gravity produce. It describes what intention produces. Gerald Arlen's description of incised lines that seem to denote measurement is equally specific. Arlen was a mining engineer. He had spent his career reading rock surfaces for evidence of tool use, of structure, of human intention written into stone. He was not describing rock art. He was describing something that read to him, in his professional judgment, as architectural notation. The kind of marking that workers leave when they are measuring and planning a space rather than decorating one. The oral traditions of the Shoshone and Bannock peoples, who have lived in the Salmon River region for centuries, reference places in the mountains that are identified as belonging to an older presence. The language used in documented ethnographic accounts from the early 20th century is consistent across multiple interviews: places that were here before the people, places that the people do not enter, places where the stone was made smooth by hands that are not remembered. These traditions were recorded by ethnographers from the University of Idaho and the Smithsonian Bureau of American Ethnology in fieldwork conducted between 1910 and 1935. They are not anecdote, they are documented cultural knowledge that has never been mapped against the physical geography of the sites described. The fissure at what was Survey Marker 11 in the Bora Creek drainage is in the precise type of terrain these traditions reference: remote limestone country, north-facing, above a drainage that runs year-round. The kind of place a culture would choose if it wanted to place something where it would remain undisturbed. What the Guard unit found in those 4 days in August 1962 has never been stated in any document that is publicly accessible. Stassen said the assessment results went up the chain and he never saw them. He said his men came out quieter. That observation, delivered by a career military officer 22 years after the fact, is not a dramatic claim. It is the kind of specific, unprovable detail that a person remembers because it was true and because it stayed with them. 11 men spent 4 days inside a limestone hill in the Salmon River Mountains. They went in on a lateral tasking from a federal agency that was never identified. They came out. No record of what they found has been produced in 62 years of requests, investigations, and inquiries. The hill is still there. The chambers aldermen entered in 1959 are still inside it. The stone cylinders he photographed are still on that floor, if the photograph is accurate, and the floor is what he said it was. The incised lines Gerald Arlen described as architectural are still on those walls. Ground-penetrating radar systems capable of mapping subsurface voids to depths of 50 feet in limestone have been commercially available since the 1980s. LiDAR terrain mapping can identify surface anomalies consistent with subsurface cavities. Neither has been applied to this site because the site, as far as any official record is concerned, does not exist. Dale Pickett wrote 4 lines in a survey log in September 1962. He noted the cable, the disturbed earth, the dark opening in the rock. He reported to district. His report was received. The fissure at Survey Marker 11 disappeared from the official record of the Challis National Forest, and it has never reappeared. The cable came down. The marker came off the maps. The 11 men who went inside came out quieter, and nobody ever asked them, on the record, what they had seen. The hill sits in the Bora Creek drainage today, unmarked, in terrain that requires real effort to reach. The forest has grown back over whatever the Guard unit disturbed. The entrance, if it is still open, would not be visible from any maintained route, and the rock inside it, smooth in the way Alderman said bothered him, carrying marks that Arlen read as architectural, holds whatever it has always held, waiting for a question that no institution has been willing to formally ask. Roy Alderman photographed those stone cylinders in 1959. That photograph existed in his personal papers until his death in 1998. His papers have not been located. The photograph may still exist somewhere. A cardboard box in a storage unit, a file cabinet in a house that changed hands, a collection that no archive has catalogued. If it surfaces, it would be the only direct physical documentation of what is inside that hill. Until it does, the record stands as Pickett left it. 4 lines, a cable, a dark opening. No explanation. The order to seal it came from somewhere above the lieutenant colonel's pay grade, and the reason it came has never been written down anywhere that anyone has been permitted to read. The gap between what the physical record suggests and what the institutional record contains is not ambiguous, it is precise. A site was accessed, assessed and sealed. The sealing was documented by a forest ranger. The assessment was confirmed by a retired officer who could not produce paperwork. The access was described by 4 independent witnesses across 13 years, and the reason for the seal has never been stated by anyone who was in a position to state it. Stassen is gone, Pickett is gone, Alderman is gone, Arlen is gone, Beaumont is gone. The people who were present, who entered, who measured, who ordered the cable strung across that entrance, who received the assessment results at whatever level they went to, have left behind fragments, a log entry, a published interview, a signed statement in a historical archive, an oral history recording in a university collection. These fragments are not rumor, they are a partial record, and partial records are what suppression produces, not absence but reduction. The full account trimmed to what could not be removed without leaving a more obvious gap. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.